Hi, this is Huang Jianyu. I'm here with my co-host Ken Wilcox, and we welcome you to another episode of China 411. This episode will be on the topic of global organizations, and we're very fortunate to welcome my dear friend Li Ting, who was the most senior Chinese American executive at Hewlett Packard and a former board member at Lenovo. Welcome, Li.
Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here.
So we love to, you got an amazing story tracing back to World War II. Love to hear a little bit about it.
Well, I was sharing with Ken a little earlier that I was born, during the war, 1942 in China, and in the city of Chongqing, and which was actually the provisional capital during the war. Because of the Japanese invasion in the coastal part of China. And of course, I don't have too much memories of those days. But we left China in 1949 after the war, and eventually immigrated to Sao Paulo, Brazil, South America, where I spent 10 years growing up. Instructed in Portuguese at that time, and then came to the U.S. In '61 to basically finish my university education, and have stayed since then here.
Well, tell us just a little bit about how that all came about. 1942, you're born. 1949, you moved to Hong Kong. Is that
Yes,
right?
to Hong Kong.
Yeah. How'd that happen? Why?
Well, my dad was with the Kuomintang government during the war, and so after the war, we obviously had to leave China, the mainland China. So instead of going to Taiwan like the KMT government did, he chose to venture out into a new war, so to speak. So Hong Kong was a kind of a stepping stone, if you will. We never, intended to settle in Hong Kong. And because his ultimate goal was to immigrate to the Americas. And in those days, it was very difficult to immigrate directly to the United States. As a Chinese, because of quota systems.
Yeah.
And we didn't have any direct relatives in the United States. So South America was an option. So we did pick Brazil. I don't know why he picked Brazil per se, because many Chinese at that time also immigrated to Argentina. For instance, yeah. So, but personally, I'm glad we went to Brazil.
So when did you come to the U.S.?
When? 61, I came to finish, because I was started studying engineering, so I came to finish my engineering degree. Got a scholarship at the Oregon State University up north, so finished that. And so when I graduated in 65, I was fortunate to get an offer from Hewlett Packard. And so that's when I started in 65.
In Palo Alto?
In Palo Alto, right in Palo Alto. Hewlett Packard in those days only had Palo Alto had only one building on the Page Mill Road. And actually in those days, working there, both Bill, Hewlett and Dave Packard were still, very active managing the company. I still remember when I first started there, went to the cafeteria, and here was Bill Hewlett standing in line in front of me. So it really kind of impressed me, in terms of, how they kind of did not act like how do you call it? Very important, and they were just part of the group, if you will.
Not the big boss, but part of the group.
Exactly.
So you've had quite a history with languages, then. You must have started in Mandarin.
I started in, actually my home dialect, it is Sichuanese.
Oh.
Because of Chongqing, my mother is from Sichuan.
Oh.
So at home we spoke Sichuan dialect.
And then in school you probably spoke some Mandarin.
Yeah, some Mandarin, although I didn't go too much in school in China.
Right.
And then went to Hong Kong, then we had to learn Cantonese.
Yeah.
And I went to Brazil, learned Portuguese.
And when you came in 1961 to Oregon, did you know English well?
A little. I took obviously some English, basic English things in Brazil, but I didn't really speak very well. So the thing that worked really well is the fact that I obviously started out in a dorm, and both my roommates, of course, were Americans. So I had to kind of pick up English, from them pretty fast. Yeah.
So Lee, most people credit Hewlett Packard for kind of starting Silicon Valley.
Right.
There's a saying of the HP way
Right.
that kind of cemented the culture and the legend of Silicon Valley.
Right.
And you were there for almost your entire career, and you basically rose through the ranks, and you were instrumental in opening up the Asia market, especially China. Walk us through that process. What was it like? How did you move up, and what was it like opening up the China market?
Well, before opening China market, you're right. We had to open other markets. That's before the China market was even open. So I started doing that way back in 1970. And when the company asked me to set up the first HP office outside of Japan, we had a joint venture already going, but a wholly owned HP office, if you will, in Taiwan. So I went to Taiwan to do that.
That's 1970.
1970, correct.
Okay.
And I have never been to Taiwan before, so I just kind of dropped in with my young family and did that, and then I helped to build a network of distributorship and offices in Southeast Asia. So I was based in Singapore for a little while, and then the China opening was very interesting. If I may tell the story very briefly, 1972, right after Nixon went to China in May of 1972, the Chinese government sent a letter to Hewlett Packard, very unusual, inviting HP to send some representative to China because they said they want to talk about some potential business. And the reason was the fact that when Nixon was there, Nixon's entourage brought with them, right, all the communication equipment, the microwave and all that in those days. Yeah, remember, in those days there was no satellite, no of course no internet, but so they didn't want to rely on the Chinese communication.
So they brought their own equipment.
They brought all their
see,
communication equipment with them, right? And the Chinese saw that, and they were very interested. And a lot of that equipment turned out to be Hewlett Packard equipment.
Wow.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah, the synthesizers, all those microwave equipment. So they thought that they would be interested talking to Hewlett Packard. And I'm sure it was intent of purchasing some of those equipment. And so this was 1972, September. And HP responded by saying, well, okay, Dave Packard was a very, always been very, global-minded.
Open.
Yeah, open, yeah. So he asked the senior vice president for international at the time in HP, a gentleman by the name of Bill Doolittle, and asked Bill to represent HP and visit China. And of course, they needed somebody that spoke some Chinese to go with him. And I guess they look around and say, hey, how about Lee?
So in that era, 1970, 71, 72, were there very many Chinese people working at HP?
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
Yeah. Most of them were in the technical area.
Yeah.
I was one of the few that was in the kind of sales and business side at that time, right? Because I opened HP office in Taiwan and so on. So
how'd that work in 72 in the PRC?
very, very, very crazy because there was no precedence, and we had to figure out diplomatically how to do this because the U.S. passport is not really obviously recognized by them at the time, and so luckily I had a U.S. passport at the time, and so we had to go through all the process. We actually started in Hong Kong. We had to get visas from the Chinese travel agency, so-called travel agency and all that. And we sat in Hong Kong for about a week waiting for the, for the visa. And finally we got the visa. We took the train from Hong Kong to the border in Guangdong. You remember, Shenzhen didn't exist at the time. Right, exactly. To the border. We then disembarked. We crossed the bridge on foot with our luggage, and then board another train on the other side, Chinese train, that took us to Guangdong. And in those days, this was October '72. Guangdong is where they had the fair, if you remember that, right? They had two fairs, the spring fair and the fall fair. Fall fair was in October. It happened to be during the fall fair. So we thought we were just going to end up in Guangdong because, foreigners were going there, not Americans, mostly Europeans, right, Japanese, business people. But surprising to us, we were there for a couple of days. They say, "Oh, we want you to go to Beijing," and that was really kind of unheard of. And so we flew to Beijing, and we were in Beijing for about over a week actually.
Who's the we at that
Oh,
point?
Bill Dooley and I,
Bill and you.
just the two of us.
Just the two of you.
Just the two of us.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And in those days, there was only one hotel the foreigners could stay in Beijing.
Which one was that?
It's called Minzu Hotel. Yeah. Today,
still there?
Yeah, it's today. Maybe the name change is really today is not a first class hotel.
Yeah.
But it was fine. And there was only one restaurant you had to eat, and you couldn't really go out without being escorted, basically.
Yeah.
It was, in those days. That's right in the midst of the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah.
You think back, '72.
Right. Yeah.
So everybody dressed the same color, gray and blue, mouse kind of clothing. And so one joke we had, Ken, is that in those days, as business people, right, Western business, we wear coat and tie, and it was kind of cold, so we had overcoat and all that. And we did kind of walk outside a little bit. And then, of course, all the local people were staring at us, right? They never seen probably foreigners at those days. So I turned to Bill and said, "Hey, Bill, they are looking at us because they have never seen a Caucasian, Western guy." And he said, no. He said, "They are looking at us because they never seen a Chinese guy wearing Western clothes." So it was a quite an experience.
How'd those conversations go during that week?
Was very, very non-productive in the sense that the way, because in those days the U.S. export license for technical stuff, especially our type of product, was very, very strict. And so not likely they would approve, to sell to the Chinese side, because the Chinese at that time, the buyers were all government entities, right? Okay, and so the way that the Chinese didn't understand that, because they didn't understand that in our Western culture, right, that there's a separation or business and government. Because China, right, everything is the same. So they assume probably, especially given the fact that Dave Packer just was stepped down from being the Secretary of Defense or Deputy Secretary of Defense from Nixon administration. So they probably thought, that must be all connected. So therefore, they keep telling us, because we keep saying, but we have to get approval. They say, what do you mean? Mr. Packer is he's the government, right? He's the government, right? It's kind of implying that.
Yeah.
Right. So, but we couldn't get through that. So every day we had this meeting, and we basically talk about the same thing for a week. We keep doing that. So finally, anyway, we said, we have to go back and we will apply. We'll talk to the government, but we can't guarantee you that we can accept your business. Okay.
So HP was probably one of the first American firms to make a really considered effort right? Not only to sell to China, but to expand in China.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
how did that happen?
well, yeah, but you remember, Zen, is that we were not trying to do business there at the time, right? Because we knew it was very difficult, almost impossible. But we went there because we were curious. Since they invited, because you couldn't go unless they invited you anyway,
Yeah.
right? So we were curious, and but I think that particular trip, if you will, I think it kind of built some goodwill, right? Even though we couldn't do much business, but I think built some goodwill in their mind. And because from 72 until 80, yeah, kind of late, until after, right, the Deng Xiaoping thing
Right.
happened, there was no business. There was no real ability to do business with China. So we didn't go back until 82. From 72 to 82 almost.
And when did HP build its bridgehead?
Right. So the first joint venture was set up actually started operationally in in the early 80s. Yeah, we start going back again around late in 79. Yeah, 79 when they start opening, right? When at Deng Xiaoping opening, we saw an opportunity, and we did go back in 79 to renew some of our contacts. And with the way we did is that we went in and set up a number of seminars, technical seminars, to kind of, to show our capabilities and our technology and so on. So yeah, I led that group when we did that in 79. So we brought in about over a dozen of our technical people, and we held concurrent seminars in Beijing in different fields, right? And we attracted hundreds of attendees from all over China. Some people told us that they took 3 days by train to come, but they came.
Mostly engineers.
Mostly technically, they were just very dying to. They had somehow, Ken, they did have access to our catalogs. In those days we print catalog, right? So they had catalogs. So they kind of read about it, but they had no idea what the real equipment could do.
Right.
So that's why they wanted to see it, right? So that's what happened. So from 79 we started that kind of a dialogue. We continued some dialogue, and then, like I say, in earnest we started negotiating first joint venture in 82. And again,
And where was that?
in Beijing. And this was their Ministry of Electronics.
Yeah.
And the minister was Zheng Zemin.
Oh, Johnson.
Oh, Jiang Zemin.
Right. He was the minister, and Packard turned out to became good friends.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So starting maybe in 82, 83, 84, did HP start to send a number of Americans?
Yeah. So we when we formed the joint venture, when we finally got the joint ventures agreed to, we're sending a team of people to to manage, and I wasn't one of them.
You weren't part of that
No,
team?
I was a member of the board. But I did help set up the whole thing. Yeah, to negotiate.
The board of the joint venture.
Right.
Yeah. So what were some of the challenges that you faced in that
Negotiated.
time frame?
Yeah. Ken, those days Chinese didn't have any business law,
Yeah.
so there was no legal framework.
Yeah.
So we were negotiating on the fly as we go.
Yeah.
So everything was purely, per agreement, per contract, whatever. But there was no probably enforceability in a way.
Yes.
And so you had to almost did it by trust, right? By kind of that's what we did. And the way in those days it worked is a joint venture is that it has to be 50-50 joint venture. So there's no one side control the other side.
Yeah.
In theory. And you send your team. They send what they call their like a deputy team. So for every senior position, we had one of their appointees as a so-called deputy. So part of their role was to represent them, but as well as to learn That was their idea, right? It's like a shadowing somebody, from the West, yeah. And it was very interesting, but very difficult to manage, yeah.
Oh, I'm also curious because the HP way is so famous, and people have definite associations, and it's a style, a culture that's quite unique, I think. How did that work in China in that era?
Yeah, I think good and bad, right? The good is that the HP culture is the characteristic of the HP way is really a very people-oriented culture, right? That's what it was. Yeah, it's not very hierarchical. It's a sharing kind of a culture, objective-driven, right? So in that sense, it was not hard for us to kind of get them to accept that. Now, on the other hand, the Chinese culture, traditional culture, obviously is one of a very much of a command structure, top down,
Hierarchy.
very top down, right? And nobody questions anything. they do what you tell them to do, basically. And so there you have to kind of work with how to resolve. But I think overall the joint venture I think it worked out reasonably well in that sense. Yeah. And anyway, yeah, that's.
So I feel like we can stay on this topic for a very long time. And I think in many ways HP's global kind of enterprises, endeavors represented the first push towards truly global organizations. But that was only half of the story. The other half, which is, Lee, you're being a board member for Lenovo. And Lenovo is fascinating in the sense that it was a Chinese company, very small, very local, but then it acquired a US brand in IBM ThinkPad. And it was something that was in many ways a truly global, where there was both Chinese and American leadership working jointly together. Can you tell us a little bit about how you became a board member? What was it like? You told me a story before about your first time as a board member. And what did you see as this kind of global organization and how you came together?
Also, give us the time frame so we can fit it into the picture.
Correct. Yeah. Again, by some quick background, Lenovo, of course, started as a Legend. It used to be called Legend.
Yeah.
And Legend was started back in the actually late 70s, I think. But they started out as a distribution company for PCs and that type of equipment. So actually, they were HP's distributor since the 80s.
Oh.
Yeah. So
And it was government owned at that time, right?
No, that's a fallacy. Legend was started by a group of scientists actually from the Academy of Sciences in Beijing, led by this gentleman called Liu Chenzi. They started in those days. They started up what they call today we call seed money, right? Okay, their seed money was like $25,000. But anyway. So because of that, I think Academy Sciences, was a major shareholder for a long time. But then Legend went public in Hong Kong through a reverse merger, and therefore Academy Science ownership dropped down to a non-controlling shareholder. Probably at that time, probably around 40% or something like that. Today, Lenovo Group Academy Science ownership is probably around less than 30%. So it's significantly kind of diluted down. So today it's really not a Chinese controlled company. It's really a public traded private company. That's what it is. So I get involved with Lenovo as a board member back in the 19 2003. 2003. And I was approached by them through a mutual friend, and they were, I think at that time they were still Chinese. They were still a Chinese company, obviously, right? All their business in China and so on. But they made their own PCs already at the time. They were thinking about or looking at trying to expand outside of China. I'm not too sure they were thinking about being a global company. They just want to expand, right? And so they were looking for some board member who had experience outside of China. Especially from America. So that's the reason I was approached. And I had already retired from HP, so there was no conflict in a sense. So I joined the board, I agreed to join the board, and as Zen was mentioned, the first couple board meetings I attended the board meeting, and they were conducted all in Chinese. Everything was in Chinese. Now, my Chinese is not that great. Especially reading Chinese, not that good. Because I was really not well educated in that. But I could understand the spoken language. So I kind of followed the meeting and all that. But so after the meeting, I went to the CEO and I said, I think the reason you recruited me is you wanted to be more of an international company. I said, but if you conduct your board meeting all in Chinese, this is not going to work because you can no way of sharing that information, right, with outside of China, outside of people who understand Chinese. So I said, I think it would be a good idea if you guys, provide also an English version of of the material. And he didn't say much. He kind of nodded his head. And we had the next meeting, and I was still prepared to just go in and listen to all those Chinese. Whoop! Suddenly, the presentation, it was dual language.
Really?
So that impressed me quite a bit, right? The fact that they really wanted to, and they were listening. They were learning, and very quick, and they act very quick. So that was something that really impressed me. So I really felt I picked the right company to join, and. So in 2005 is when they decided to, so before buying the IBM, we did look at other potential, obviously, acquisitions. I won't have to mention some of the names, but there were some other companies today no longer exist. And but then the IBM thing surfaced, the IBM PC thing surfaced, and so obviously it looked pretty interesting. But I think also right away everybody felt it was a very, very high risk, because of the IBM PC, Lenovo's business at that time, the whole company was around 3 billion revenue, 3 billion annual revenue. The IBM one was already 10 billion, so it was like 3 times larger. So how do you acquire, a non-Chinese company with 3 times the revenue and organization and so on, So there's a lot of debate at the board level, obviously, especially trying to assess the risks. How we're going to do this? So I think the bottom line is that I think they felt that they wanted to take the risk, right? That they needed to do this to fundamentally transform the company into a more of a global company. That's their ambition. And but to do that, they accepted the fact that they could not manage the newly formed company. That they have to allow American or some from the other side, Western, to manage the global enterprise initially. Which is something, again, I thought was very revealing, right? In terms of accepting understanding their own limitations, right? And accepting, to give up, if you will, the CEO role to to somebody from the
Well, and especially where Chinese corporate management techniques would be so different,
Yeah.
I would think,
yeah.
from American corporate management
Yeah.
techniques.
Although what also impressed me is that the chair at that time, the original founder, Mr. Liu, which at that time was chairman then, he was not the CEO already. I always felt that he was a very, very forward-looking guy. He was not a typical Chinese. You think that he came from the academy and all that, right? He would be very traditional. No, he was very. If you talk to him, right, the type of way, the questions he asked you and all that, showed that he wanted to change, to look at the outside, okay, and those questions were not how do you call. It's not just for show, that he really, because you can tell that behind the scenes he was taking action, right, to transform the organization. So that was that, and so that's what I think made the decision move forward. And if you remember, after they did the transaction was completed, they appointed the IBM executive at the time, Mike Ward, to be the CEO, and then even the whole senior team, they try to make it, try to pick the best person, if you will, right? So that there's some Chinese and some non-Chinese and so on. And I think Mike, he was a capable. Probably was successful within the IBM, but I think he had some difficulty trying to bridge the cultures. Definitely there were some cultural differences, obviously, right? And you need somebody that can really figure out how to bring them together without destroying it, if you will. And I think the progress was slow in integrating that culture. And that's why he was, he was asked to leave after a couple of years, right? And then they brought in the gentleman called Bill Amelio from Dell, and
was he more successful?
He was more successful in the sense that he got more things done. And then I think what happened then is that Bill had some vision that probably did not quite coincide with the chairman's vision. And then if you remember back in 2007 or 2008, when the financial crisis hit, I think that exposed you know how it always happens, right?
Yeah.
When the whole business starts suffering a little bit, and then the differences kind of becomes more
evident,
right?
Yeah.
And
So what are the biggest differences in your recollection, the biggest challenges for an organization being run by both Americans and Chinese?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't know if all the Chinese companies behave that way, but the old Legends culture, right, was one where I think they are very they are very serious about holding people accountable for for what they say and what they do. So it's like okay, you say you're gonna do this, then you gotta deliver. No excuses, kind of thing, right?
This is on the Chinese side.
On the Chinese side,
Yeah.
on the Legend side, and I think in the Western side, you always have a little bit different, more tolerance sometimes, right? Yeah. So always some reasons, something to happen. So I think that was one part of it that created some differences, right? Second, I think you're right. The Legend culture has always been a very action oriented. So they want quick action. They don't want to spend a lot of time debating and so on. Okay, and while the Western ones tend to be more of a consensus kind of thing, so things drag out a little more, right? Then then there's missed opportunities and things like that. So I think those are some of the differences, yeah. And but today, I was on the. I only retired from the board last year, so I was on the board for 13 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw a lot of changes, a maturing of the organization. So today, if you look at the Lenovo organization, it's led by we call him YY, Yang Jing.
Yeah.
And he is a guy that I think was able to pull together the team because he himself, I think, is a very how do you call humble kind of guy in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just as an example, that when the original deal with IBM was done, he was the CEO of Legend at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave up his role as a CEO, right, and became chairman because the chairman kind of ceded the role to him in order to save his face and position, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But he was not a CEO. So what he did is that, but he knew his limitation, right? He knew that his English was not good, and he didn't have the global experience. So he moved he and his family to North Carolina, to the Lenovo's U.S. headquarters, right? Because that's where IBM thing was. So he spent 3 years there, learning to be a global person, to learn the language. So right after that, he was able to conduct meetings in English without a translator. He was able to go on, conferences, forums, and speak. And today, if you listen to his English is very, very good, very fluent. So that's something that shows that he, again, right, he is a desire to learn and to improve himself.
So today, would you say that the company has more of a Chinese culture or more of an American culture?
I would say it's neither. I think it's a
Neither.
combination. Because their top management to 12 people, I would say it's probably half and half, half Chinese and half non-Chinese. And all their meetings are conducted in English. Obviously, by necessity, it has to be. So everybody has to learn English. Everybody has to be fluent in English. It's a virtual organization because their executives are spread out over the place, and they meet virtually, once a week by teleconferencing, whatever, and then once a month they meet physically, for sure, at a minimum, and it is in a way I say it's a balance, is that he is trying to be a consensus builder, right? But I have attended some of their management meetings, so I know. But at some point, he tells, we got to make a decision. Once we make it, everybody, kind of follows in line. None of this politicking, like some happens to a lot of large organizations, right? People say, yeah, we agree, but then they really don't agree. Or they don't follow through, right? Because so the accountability part helps because then they say, okay, we agree. Then I'm going to get you're accountable. You better deliver. Okay.
So would you call it a success today?
Today, I would say is success as an organization, as a global organization. That is able to meld cultures, right? It's probably the only one I've seen that. And the other thing that makes it global, in my opinion, versus what I call a multinational, there's a difference. Because a global means that because of the fact that they claim to have two headquarters, kind of makes them say that we are not Chinese nor American, right? Also makes their people think differently, so that from a product development, from a technology, they are not just looking at one market as a key market. They are looking at what is the best, right, from an overall market, which is different because the multinational, the traditional U.S. multinational is different. And I would say even HP was like that for a long time. Is that all the decision on key decisions, right, in product or technology or marketing, it's really U.S. centric, right? So the idea is that you're successful in the U.S., then we export that. And today that doesn't work as well.
So what can American firms learn from this Lenovo experience? And vice versa, given the large number of deals we hear today of Chinese firms acquiring U.S. companies, what can Chinese firms learn from the Lenovo experience?
Well, I think the learning is that fact is that if you want to expand, you want to acquire, you need to treat that piece, right, as equally valuable as your own, and not impose what you have over what you are bringing in. From a U.S. company point of view, I think that the U.S. companies, most of U.S. companies, the management are still very U.S. centric, right? They don't have, the way I described Lenovo's case today, right? You have half of your people are really global managers outside the U.S. Most U.S. companies are not like that, right? Even we even talk about U.S. company board of directors, right? If you look at most of the U.S. companies, board of directors are still not very, very diverse in a sense. And yet, many of those companies, more than 50% of their business outside the United States. Correct, right? So that's something that's culturally very, it's very slow to it's some kind are making progress. I'm not saying that everybody's like that, but it probably is not as moving as fast as they should, I would say.
How about the Chinese companies? What can they learn?
Chinese companies, the same thing, right? My recommend to Chinese companies looking to do things like abroad is that they do look at Lenovo as a case study, and really, learn from some of the experience. Because if the Chinese company has a culture whereby, again, they say, "Oh, we want to do this, but we want to impose the Chinese, management and culture." And if I buy this company, I send a whole bunch of Chinese executives to run it. The traditional Japanese model, if you think about it, that would not work very well today. Not work very well. Because most of Chinese companies, I'm Chinese. I'm very proud to be Chinese origin, but Chinese companies management still do not have deep experience managing outside of China, right? So they should not assume that, hey, just because I'm very successful in China, I can just go ahead and do this outside. It's not going. I don't think it's going to work very well. Yeah.
Terrific, Ken. Any more questions?
Oh no, I'm fine. Thanks.
Well, I feel
very
like
good, very interesting.
we can go on forever, but with the interest of time,
Sure.
I want to thank you again, Lee.
Well, you're welcome.
And this is another episode of China 411. See you in the future.